can't pray or read the Bible in schools. They don't say the Pledge of Allegiance in schools anymore. The government allows homosexuality. The government allows abortion. The U.S. was founded as a Christian nation. So, welcome to The Wandering Prodigal. So, I want to come to talk to you about the persecution complex. It's something we've heard about, and it's something we've experienced. Many of us that came out of the evangelical world have even thought this way. But what is the persecution complex? It's the belief that Christian values are being oppressed by society and government, much like what I demonstrated at the beginning. Many of their rights are being trampled all over, and they're not being allowed to be able to practice and believe what they believe. It ultimately comes down to good versus evil, God versus Satan, and ultimately it's Christian values versus secular values. And like I said, this belief is something that's held by the vast majority of Christian white evangelicals. And it is something that we're going to all have to work around. It's very complex. This list that I just rattled off here is just a basic list, but it ultimately comes down to it's a pretty complex list of things that ultimately come down to. What it ultimately comes down to is that their values are not being met, that their beliefs are not being allowed, that they're being told they cannot practice what they believe. But has it always been this way? Nah, it started back in the mid-20th century. It was after a series of court rulings that put boundaries on such activities as public prayer and public Bible reading in schools and in public places such as government buildings and other public places and events that are sponsored by the government. Basically blurring those divide between church and state. This was something that was furthered by the Religious Act of 1998. It's an international act that was put in place to be able to recognize that all religions and all beliefs had validity, that they could not be stifled or hindered in any way. Something else that also fed into this whole feeling of being persecuted was the 9/11 attacks, because most of the attackers were Muslim. It was assumed that all Muslims were against the United States. They were against the values that the Christians had put forth and the beliefs that they held. And it just became more of a holy war. And it's something that's been growing. I know that I myself had held that view after 9/11. It was something that was a very strong feeling. I had a lot of animosity toward Muslims. And I worked around a lot of Muslims, and I became very insecure around them for a long time. But I had to really work through that. And so, yeah, there is this furtherness of feeling that other religions are invading our country, and it's they're feeling like they're being crowded out. We also have the problem with top religious leaders and conservative politicians also feeding into this. They have an agenda that they want to be able to push. We're seeing a lot of that coming up with Dominion theology, Christian nationalism, and Reconstructionism. Those are some big things that are really coming up. We're seeing a lot of that being pushed through with the homeschool movement. But furthermore, uh, there's been small things, such media, movies, and books that have come out, such as God Is Not Dead, the Left Behind books, and also the Frank Peretti books that were out. They all seem to have this good versus evil, the secular Satan type atheist against the Christians, and that the Christians were the ones that were the underdogs, and they had to overcome those strong, overtaking beliefs and overtaking the whole world, basically. We have further movements such as the Christian Reconstruction movement and the homeschooling. I just alluded to that here prior. They're very strong. The homeschooling, there is a whole movement out there by the Christians that basically they believe that homeschooling and private schools are more important than public schools, because the public schools are polluting young children's minds, and they have to be able to overtake that with their own beliefs. We also have Christian nationalism. That is something that has been around for a long time, but it's something that has been growing stronger and a lot louder lately, and especially in the last 4 years. The government has been closing that gap between church and state, and as a result, it's being influenced a lot more by the Christian beliefs and trying to crowd out other beliefs. The Christian nationalist type ideal seems to think that they are stronger, they're more important than anybody else, and it puts them on top of everybody. And so, as a result, it creates this superiority complex, and it snowballs back into the whole persecution thing because they're being overtaken again. And so it also allows them to be prone to conspiracy theories as a result. The biggest ones we keep hearing about are revolving around the whole political movement, and especially if you're a Democrat. I hear a whole mess of those things revolving around what the Democrats are doing. Also, media. That's a huge one. I'll say that, media does have a bad influence in many ways. It can sway a lot of thought process, and you have to really weigh through what is real and what's not. I tend to take a look at what I see most of and weigh that as to the possibilities and do a little research into it and behind the scenes to see who is real and who is not. But the conspiracy theories, that's a huge one. Everything that would feed into the whole Revelation storyline and to show the end times. We're seeing a lot of that revolving around Bill Gates. That's one of the biggest ones I've seen, is that Bill Gates is trying to have us followed, and I don't know, there's a whole mess of theories, conspiracy theories revolving around that type of thing. The mark of the beast is basically what they're trying to say that he's bringing in, and it's really bad. But conspiracy theories is a very strong thing that has been birthed out of the whole persecution complex. There's been a push to ban LGBTQ rights and abortion. Those laws were brought about as being concerned for those people, as that they are people. And yet there's people within Congress that are trying to push away those people legally and to not allow them to be a part of society. And so it's a growing concern that there's a large swath of people that are being shut out. You can also add into that a lot of the racism that's going on, and it just snowballs from there, and it just rolls right back to more conspiracy theories, more persecution feelings, and it's just a really huge problem. But do they have a valid reason for this? outside the U.S., there are several countries that do disallow uh, various religions. They do have state religions, and they do disallow various religions, especially Christianity, from being practiced within their countries, such as Iran, North Korea, Saudi Arabia, uh, Tajikistan. China is a huge one. I remember being in Bible college when we would talk about the fact that anybody who were trying to go into China, if you went into China, you had to stay quiet and you had to go under the radar that you were a Christian in order to evangelize Chinese. And so, yeah, they do disallow that, and they'll arrest you if you start actually coming way out there and proselytizing the Chinese people. There are countries out there that do persecute Christians. But what about here in the U.S.? Um, a number of political figures are pushing for the U.S. That it was founded as a Christian nation, as well as conservatives on the Supreme Court are starting to assert that others' rights to their own beliefs are infringing on the Christian beliefs. And that, I think that's where a lot of the problems are stemming from, is that they're believing that they're being infringed upon. They're feeling crowded out. They're not feeling like they have this unique, superior belief. The points at the beginning are not fully valid, but twisted to make it seem valid. So, prayer in schools not being allowed, reading the Bible, the abortion issue, saying the Pledge of Allegiance, LGBTQ marriage being allowed. These are all things that they feel like they've been infringed upon. And ultimately, we have to look at the depth of them. Right now, they're just looking at the surface. And look at the surface of many things. I look at Washington State here. They've passed a law that brings in sex education for every grade from kindergarten up through senior year in high school. But you have to look into the depths of it, because there's so much sexual abuse that's going on for kids that are really young. They want to be able to help kids understand who they are. And because of this education, it's all being wrapped under the sex education. They're hoping to help to bring every child up with a proper identity of who they are. Take a look at prayer and Bible not being allowed in schools. You can still pray and you can still read your Bible. You just have to do it more on your own time. There is no public prayer or public Bible reading that's allowed, because it forces it on others that do not believe in that. And so ultimately, there has to be an allowance for everybody to be able to believe and practice what they believe. There is so much diversity in the United States, and not everybody believes in God and Jesus. The Pledge of Allegiance. Most schools will still do practice saying the Pledge of Allegiance every morning, but the thing is that they cannot force it on anybody who does not believe in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. It is an infringement on their beliefs. Yes, the government has pushed in many states LGBTQ rights in marriage. It is legal to, in many states, I know here in Washington, it's legal for anybody within the LGBTQ community, gays to marry gays, lesbians marry lesbians, that thing, for them to each marry each other. The thing that they want you to realize is that it's their own life, that it's not a threat to the Christian life or the Christian beliefs. All they're seeking is acceptance and to be recognized by political and social groups. It's a huge thing. They want to be able to live life exactly like everybody else does, without any infringements on their beliefs, without being forced to do something that they don't believe in. Abortion was made legal back in the 1970s under the Roe v. Wade, and it was based off of the legislation and the court decisions that the woman's body is her own, that no one has the right to be able to tell the woman how she needs to be able to treat her own body. Most outside the evangelical community do support abortion rights and are pro-choice. It's mostly an evangelical issue that they are against abortion. Yeah, it's a hot topic. Even I myself wrestle with some aspects of it, but for me, my belief is that the woman has the right to her own body. Was the United States built as a Christian nation? No. It never was, and it never will be. The Constitution makes that pretty clear. The Constitution actually refers to religion twice. In the First Amendment, it bars laws respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So it basically says, you're free to believe whatever you believe. Just don't force it on anybody else. Also, Article 4 is prohibiting religious testing for public office. It is a growing concern. It is also a driving force for what we're seeing within politics today, in legislation. And if we're able to overcome a lot of these beliefs and help them to understand that, it's a tough thing because they're conditioned to believe all of this. I know I was. And it took me a long time to finally understand, wait a minute. I believe what I believe. I should let them to believe what they're believing. We also need to educate ourselves on the real freedoms of our beliefs. You know, one of the things I've been hearing a lot lately are that atheists can be as bad as evangelicals in many ways in that respect. There's a lot of them out there that are trying to force their beliefs on the Christians. And they feel that their rights are being infringed on. And in many ways they are. It is a huge thing right now that is trying to overrun an atheist's right to be able to believe that there is no such thing as a God. But the thing is, the Constitution says that they can believe that. They just can't force that on anybody else. Which leads us in, we need to be careful that we don't overstep our rights to be able to stop their rights. As I've been saying a lot in other circles, is that in order for us to have our rights, we have responsibility to be able to have those rights and freedoms. And so we need to take responsibility on what we believe and to be able to not force it on anybody else. We need to be able to learn to be able to live harmoniously with everybody in order to do that. Is this something I struggle with? Yeah, it's something I'm learning. It's a hard thing. I came out of evangelicalism, and I basically came out of it swinging because it was a thing. It was a huge thing for me to realize that the world I believed in was wrong. And I really wanted to go out there and tell everybody, you're wrong. But you know what? I can't do that. Number one, it brings up a big fight, and it just makes matters worse. Now, if they're going to be coming in and trying to infringe on, say, this person over here or my beliefs, yeah, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to say, hey, you know what? They have the right to be able to believe that. And so we need to give them that room to be able to believe that. So you need to stop it. And here's the thing. We are free to believe whatever we want to believe. As long as we are not living it in a way that hurts other people, infringes on their rights, we are open to believe however we want to do. We can believe that Dumbo is God if we want to. But we're free to be able to do that. That's the whole thing about a free country. We are free to believe as we believe. That was the whole basis around the Constitution. That's the reason why we have the First Amendment and all these parts, is that they were declaring their laws for freedom. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and hit the subscribe, and also hit the notifications for any of the new videos that come out. And I hope you go check some of the other videos that I have, and I will talk to you later on. Thanks for watching The Wandering Prodigal.